Sonic Lab
TV.
We're listening to RaZor, which is a new synthesizer from Native Instruments. It's actually a completely different kind of synthesizer because it's sort of a synthesizer built within a synthesizer. And that is, it's totally built within Reaktor, which is Native Instruments' software modular construction kit. It's been going for many years. It's up to version 5 and above, and it allows people to build these really complicated machines inside it. Now what this is an ensemble, which is a kind of pre-constructed synthesizer, and it's made by a guy called Errorsmith. That's Errorsmith, not Aerosmith. Very different things. And he is an experimental Berlin techno artist. He's been making and tweaking this over a period of time just to work on his own material, and he sort of, whenever he comes up with a new feature, he said it inspires him. And obviously he's got it to such an advanced stage, he's got together with Native Instruments themselves to package it up into a releasable synthesizer. Okay, so this is RaZor. I'm running it in the standalone version of the Reaktor player, which is a free download from Native Instruments. You can see I've loaded the ensemble here, just loads up into this window. This gives me an opportunity to browse various different patches and snapshots and what have you. I'll switch that off for the time being because it means that we can see the interface a bit better. And it's a fairly clean interface, it's nice and clear. There's this big gap here, and I'll just show you what that's for. If I play a sound, you can see that there's quite a fancy display here which shows the individual harmonic levels and modulations. It gives you an idea of roughly what's going on behind the scenes. You can also look at it as a scope or filter output. So you're looking at the interface, it's actually fairly straightforward. We've got 2 oscillators here, 2 filters, multi-mode filters. We've got 3 envelopes here, amplitude, envelope 2 and envelope 3. We've also got 2 LFOs and a sidechain, which is kind of like a mod matrix. On the face of it, it's quite a traditional looking interface. I mean, nothing kind of fancy there. But when you look at a bit under the hood, you start to see what the differences are. For instance, if we take a look at oscillator 1, admittedly, the first couple of waves look pretty straightforward. We'll go pulse to saw. You can see that that's sawtooth morphing to a pulse. Very nice. And again, the duo saw, this is quite an interesting one. 2 saw waves, and adds them together in a unique way so that you can detune them and get some real big movement. But when we start looking at some of these other ones, like say primes for instance, this is a real additive delight. So all those harmonics coming in there, and this is something that you can certainly create with 320 individual sine waves to make up a wave. We'll take a look at the filter here as well. We've got a basic low pass filter dialed in at the moment. You could just quick have a listen on that. We can add some boost to take some resonance in there. We can affect the width of the cue, and we can also affect the slope of the filter, so some nice functions there. Also got something called a low pass dirty filter, which adds a bit of distortion. There's a vowel filter. Again, I'm not going to go into what every single one does, but just give you a flavour of the sort of unusual elements of building blocks that are going into creating the basic sounds of this synth. Also notice there's quite a lot of movement going on in the interface with some of these sounds, and that's because the modulation and the routing is actually quite intuitive. It's very cool. Let's take the cutoff frequency here for example. We've got 3 slots. We could load into one of them. Let's have an LFO, and we'll modulate it by positive a certain amount. So now if I play, can see that the LFO is now modulating the frequency. So now if I want to add another one, I can add in the mod wheel to the resonance. So I'll take that up, add it by a certain amount here, and now I can create additional modulation routings, and this could go on and on. Anything that has one of these sort of light grey rings around it allows you to modulate it. It's quite an interesting way of doing things, and I find it pretty intuitive. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of familiarity in the interface. You know, there's things that we recognise from analog subtractive synthesis, but what's actually going on under the hood is very different. And this results in some quite digital and brittle and harsh and edgy sounds, as well as some really nice soft and mellow stuff. This is pretty much helped by the effects section. So let's start with the dissonant effects. Some of these are quite subtle. You can hear it just sort of introducing some of the more dissonant harmonics, unsurprisingly. We'll try stiff string. This is kind of interesting. It adds like a kind of a zing if I pull it back a little bit. Right up to a kind of bell-like tone. There's also a stretcher, which is seems to stretch the interval between all the different harmonics. These, on the whole, probably have limited appeal to me, but I imagine if you're into doing some dissonant stuff, then going to be pretty useful. The stereo effects are probably more usable. We've got an auto pan here, stereo spread. Probably my favourite, I think, is the synced reverb, which kind of gives a really very lush sound. Reminds me of the old lexicon algorithms where you had kind of chorus and reverb combined. Speaking of chorus, here's chorus effect. Finally, we've got the compressor and saturation. We've got compressor going on here. I'll just switch that in. That's fairly clean. We've got some fairly dirty stuff as well. Here's a really driven limiter. Obviously, I'm pushing this hard. Lots of clipping. I mean, obviously, I'm using these fairly extreme settings. Clip compressor. And for some really out there stuff, this is quite good. This is like a sort of a saturator. Different kinds of clipping. You can modulate most of the parameters. If I switch these on, you can see that there's the grey ring and a couple of sources available for each of these parameters. So you can get quite a lot of dynamic effects changing going on if you take the time to program it. So I really enjoyed RaZor. I thought it was an interesting and well-made synthesizer. I mean, aside from the fact that it's built in something else in Reaktor, it's kind of astonishing, really. Although it's billed as a drum and bass synth, you can find loads of wobble bass patches in the patch list. It's actually quite nice for some eerie and unusual pads. And that's a bit of a problem because essentially it really is only able to give you 6 voices maximum. So you're not going to get these huge polyphonic spreads on it. It's just not going to happen. Speaking of sounds, there's another limitation which is perhaps a bit more serious, and that is with the Reaktor player. I was running in standalone mode here. You can't save any snapshots. So you tweak, you get a sound you like, it's sort of gone forever. And that, I think, could be a bit of a problem for some people. Although if you're running it as a virtual instrument inside your DAW, whatever your current setup is saved when you save your DAW document. So I suppose that's something. But if you want to create your own patches, you're going to need a full version of Reaktor, which is going to set you back €379. Speaking of pricing, this is available at €69, a download from the Native Instrument website. Other currencies will scroll now. I think that's a pretty good deal, really. I mean, there's a lot of inspiration there, a lot of sounds that are different from what you're going to find elsewhere. And I think it's worth investing if you're just looking for something else that will give you a slightly different slant. Or also, perhaps if you're into drum and bass and you want lots of wobble basses, this is the place to go.